I'm Chris with Lorespire. Today I'm sitting down with Victor from Once Lost Games, and we're going to talk about the upcoming, or I guess in production, Wayward Realms. How are you doing today, Victor?
I'm doing well. Happy to be here. It's been tough to find time lately with us getting ready for the Kickstarter launch, but managed to squeeze you in today, so very excited.
Awesome. Me too. Definitely appreciate you doing that for us. So I guess just to kick things off, do you want to let everybody know how long you've been with Once Lost Games, what your role with the studio is, and maybe your background in the industry?
Sure thing. I actually just hit 4 years this past April. So started in 2020 with Once Lost. Actually started just as a writer, but as the company grew and we had new positions that we had to create and new duties and stuff like that, I've kind of risen through the ranks with it. And I am currently creative producer on the project. What that basically means is I'm in charge of just making sure that all the teams are on the same page. Nobody's contradicting what another department is doing. We're all sticking to the same vision for the company. And since we are a completely remote studio, it's obviously very important to be able to have that cohesive with everybody. And then aside from that, like specific duty to that role, I contribute to the writing, 2D concept art, and game design. I also used to do the community management, but luckily we brought on Victoria, who's now our community manager, and does an amazing job with that. So I've been happy to get a little bit off my plate.
Can you share with us just kind of the mindset and the game design philosophy then that Once Lost Games is bringing to the Wayward Realms?
Sure thing. And I guess we sort of have a few different design philosophies depending on what specifically we're talking about. But like overall, as far as the game, we're really wanting to get back to the old CRPG roots of RPGs. Right. Obviously, the name of the company says it itself, Once Lost Games. So really about like making those in-depth systems, lots of different ways you can take your character, as opposed to like the more simplified kind of versions that are more prevalent nowadays. As far as say like narrative art design philosophy, we're really going for something more grounded, much less high fantasy, though there are some very much high fantasy elements in it. We do try to keep it a little more grounded, a little more relatable, to players, so you can get in there, you know what's going on, you understand the world, but then like you run into something magical, and that should be awe-inspiring. It's magic. It's supposed to be exciting, mysterious. So that's sort of our goal with that.
Well, let's I guess I wanted to talk a little bit about the AMA videos that Once Lost Games has put out on their YouTube channel about the Wayward Realms. In those videos, the Wayward Realms is repeatedly referred to as a spiritual successor to the Elder Scrolls Daggerfall. Can you just explain to us what exactly that means, what y'all mean by that, and maybe why the Wayward Realms is going to be a spiritual successor over maybe some of the actual Elder Scrolls games that came later?
Sure. Well, I guess the simple answer is that Daggerfall was the last one that Ted and Julian worked on together, so it would make too much sense to do a spiritual successor to a game they didn't work on. But the truth of it is there's a really different design philosophy when you go from Daggerfall to the later games. The later ones are more like streamlined, more accessible, and it keeps getting so with each entry. And we're really trying to get back again to the old school design philosophy, that classic design philosophy where many systems, your choices are more important. Lots of different ways to approach situations, stuff like that. And then as well as Daggerfall is like the scale itself. For the longest time, it was one of the top games as far as like the biggest world created. Well, and still is in a lot of aspects. So there's, things like Minecraft, stuff like that can, go on for, huge expanses. But yeah, like, again, we want to bring back that scale, huge cities, giant landmass, that type of thing.
I actually just recently started playing Daggerfall. The Wayward Realms got me really interested in it, so I started playing it for the first time. And whenever I first got out of the first dungeon and looked at the world map so I could fast travel, I was like, there's like hundreds of cities on here. I didn't actually count them, but there was so many. I was like, that's crazy. And then you go to the city and there's like dozens and dozens of buildings in each city. The
Mhm.
scale was, I'd heard it was a large game before, but actually seeing it for myself, it was even bigger than I expected. So that's pretty cool. Definitely awesome. I guess I should have mentioned about Ted and Julian before, but for anybody who doesn't know, could you just explain very quickly who they are?
Yeah, well, Ted and Julian were two of the original members that created the Elder Scrolls. Julian was technical director on, I believe both Arena and Daggerfall. Ted was one of the lead designers on Arena and then the lead designer on Daggerfall. So they've kind of really played a pivotal role in creating that universe and basically creating all the mechanics that have gone on through the years into the newer games, even though again, like, they've been simplified a bit, but that core is still there.
Whenever it comes to the Wayward Realms, I understand that it's going to be procedurally generated, kind of similar to how Daggerfall was. But you're going to use techniques like seeding and handcrafted touches and whatnot. Can you explain just how all of that works, what effects it'll have on, dungeons and general gameplay, and how much of the game world might be different from one playthrough to another
Mhm.
because of that?
Sure thing. Well, I guess it's important to note it's sometimes confusing whenever we talk about procedural generating and seeding and stuff like that. Especially like when you think of things like Minecraft that can give you tons of different variations, new worlds every time you play. But this is meant to be the same starting scenario for each playthrough. It's going to be the same world, the same buildings, cities, dungeons. They're all in the same locations. It's all the same start, but then the way our procedural system works and really just our gameplay in general, things can start changing from that point on. So the playthroughs will vary as you progress through them, but it has that same start. The procedural generation we're doing is at runtime, as opposed to having it always set exactly the same. We do have the ability to change things up. So if, say, like two factions are fighting, a city along their border might wind up being destroyed, right? So you would have that procedural city there through your playthrough. You've been to it before. One day you get there and the buildings have been replaced by like the burnt versions of them, right? They've been burned to the ground. So that's the kind of stuff that the procedural generation allows us to do.
So just so that I understand, so that would mean like within the same playthrough, like it might be there and then later on it's burnt and destroyed, or do you mean if it's there in one playthrough it'll always be there and maybe in the next playthrough it's burnt and destroyed from the start?
Well, that city will always be there, right? Every playthrough is going to be there at the start, but depending on what happens in your playthrough, that might get destroyed, might not. So
Okay.
you run into different scenarios based on what is happening in your playthrough. And again, a lot of it comes down to that faction struggle for power.
Great, and that's actually a perfect segue to my next question here. Wanted to ask about the VGM or virtual game manager, game master. Do y'all call it manager or master?
Master.
Okay, the virtual game master. Can you explain just what exactly that is and how it's going to affect gameplay and the game world?
Sure thing. And it is one of those things that's a bit tricky to talk about because obviously when you're like summarizing and generalizing it, it's kind of easy for it to feel like just a magic box, right? Like we just hand wave it away. Oh, the VGM will take care of this kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little tricky to talk in that sense, but the basic idea is that the VGM will tailor a playthrough to that play style that you're doing at the time. So I guess like an example would be if you're playing a mage, then the VGM is going to tailor things around that gameplay, like giving you quests to maybe go find more magical words to create spells from, or giving you enemies that maybe might be more resistant to magic just to give you a challenge. So basically like how a real life tabletop game master, like your players, what they like to do, you're gonna tailor your story that you're telling them based on their likes or dislikes. You might give them a challenge sometime, you might try to make it a lot more fun another. So that's one of the aspects of it. The other aspect, it also creates quests for the player, and that is something, again, that can seem a little hand wavy, like, oh, it just makes new quests, like Daggerfall, go to X, get Y, be back by Z kind of thing. But we're actually approaching it a bit different, just to make it more, I guess, more interesting to the player. We're actually creating quests as a 5-act structure. So for those who aren't familiar with the 5-act, you have your setup, your build-up, your climax, your decline, and then your resolution. And basically what that means is your setup is whatever's going on in the world, right? Your factions, who's fighting in this region, what kind of monsters are nearby, that kind of thing. Anything that can set up a quest for a player. Your build-up is getting the quest, going to the quest location, whatever that might be, fighting whatever's there, retrieving whatever you need, right? And that'll be your climax as well once you get that. Then decline, going back to your quest giver, though you could have a bunch of different conflicts and adventures in between as you're trying to just get back. And then resolution is what happens at the end of that quest, like, or what rewards do you get, how your reputation changes with the factions, how your renown changes in the world, that kind of thing. And so using that structure, the VGM is able to take those bits and pieces and kind of fill in those variables that are within, like, who are the factions that are fighting right here? It's going to pick something that's related to your character, or most likely pick something related to your character. Again, we offer some variety. So the factions you're affiliated with, might tie something to that. Might tie into a shopkeeper that you visit a lot of times. So it recognizes that you've been to that person a lot of time, that person. It's going to stick them in a quest, stick them in a dangerous situation, or maybe they're just the quest giver. So that way it's more interesting to the player. You have you have a relationship with the faction or the person or whatever, and this makes you really more interested in the quest as opposed to just a throwaway, go here, get this, come back.
That just sounds absolutely amazing to me. I get tired of these generic radiant quests that are put into games. It really sounds really awesome to have a system that's actually going to recognize the character that you built, the relationships that you have in the game, and it's going to tailor quests and maybe even the game world, as I understand it, around what you're doing and what your character is. So yeah, that sounds amazing. I freaking love that. So let's move on a little bit to maybe character creation development. That's something that's really important to pretty much everybody. And I'm definitely curious about that. Now I know that there are 8 planned playable races right now, and I just wanted to know, in a lot of games they'll have a bunch of different races, but there won't really be much variation or much meaningful variation. So how do y'all plan to make the races feel distinct?
Yeah, certainly. One thing we've really tried to avoid is just make every body the same with just a different head, right? Then we kind of see a bit too much in RPGs. If you guys haven't seen our concept art and stuff like that on these characters, be sure to check that out, because we do have different morphology for all the races, and we do want to make that important. There's, first of all, each race gets a bonus to a different attribute, right? We have the 8 attributes to choose from. So that already sets them apart a little bit, as far as if you want to min-max a build, you want a really strong strength-based build, then you go with an ogre, because an ogre is going to be the strongest because of that bonus. There'll be caps to skills and to attributes. So you want the strongest character, that's going to be an ogre. You want the fastest, that's going to be a goblin. So that's the first step. But secondly, with each one comes a few little different unique perks and gameplay stuff. For example, the goblins can sneak a lot faster because they're meant to run on all 4s. Now, we haven't done any 3D animation for that yet, for third person view, so we'll see how well that works out. But that is the goal with that. They'll be crawling along faster because of their speed bonuses. Orcs have longer arms, they get a longer reach to melee. things like that that just kind of set them apart. And then, of course, role play wise, dialogue wise, it's very important. Like what you pick, the people are going to have their mindsets about specific races already, so they're going to be a bit prejudiced. If you're an orc over like in Splendor along the border with She, which is the Orcish kingdom, some factions are race specific, so just by your choice you might automatically just be cut off from a whole faction because of that. So we're really trying to make them all feel unique, have different gameplay mechanics, and then also the role play is really important to us as well.
Awesome. Will there be maybe like even some, quests that are specifically for certain races?
No, for sure there will be. I mean, especially like faction wise, we're really putting a lot of emphasis on the factions. So those quest lines and stuff like that are the ones that are race specific.
Race specific.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Just want to say I freaking love that y'all are putting ogres in there. Most games don't do that, and I want to play an ogre. That'll definitely be my first character. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, one of the things with the races that we wanted to do is you see in other games like goblins, ogres, sometimes orcs, like they're sort of these throwaway people, right? Like that they're just meant for the player to go and slaughter. And we really wanted to take them and be like, well, they're obviously have some kind of culture to them. You see they got clothing, they got weapons, like you're going to want to learn more about them. So we just thought, they are playable. You can be that. You can learn about their cultures and experience what it's like to be one of them in the world.
I remember reading one of the books in the Library of Logos. And man, I wish I'd written it down. It was the one where a girl appears to be kidnapped by ogres, and then as it goes on, like her kind of prejudice against them changes, and it turns out, like kind of something else is going on. And like I already wanted to play an ogre before that, but that made me feel like playing one is going to be even more interesting, because I could see in that book, that lore book that y'all have there in the Library of Logos, that ogres weren't just going to be what you would typically expect them to be,
Right.
which I thought was really, really cool. You said that people should check out the character models. Where's the best place for them to do that? Just on the Discord, or where would you like to refer them?
Any of our social media, we're pretty much all over the place. YouTube, even in the community tab, you can go through there. Obviously, Reddit, Twitter, Discord, pretty much anywhere you can think of, we're likely on there. It would just be a matter of like scrolling through. Of course, we're always putting out new stuff every week, so be sure you're following along and checking out the new things we're revealing. Usually have some little bit of lore, some little bit of concept art each week.
Okay, yeah, I'll make sure to link to all of that stuff in the description of this video for anybody who's interested. I will say you can get a lot. It's where I got most of mine. What I found on it from the announcements section of the Discord, so I can definitely recommend that. But I'll link to all of it down in the video description. Okay, sticking with the theme of kind of character creation, how much choice is actually planned to be included in character creation? Will people be able to choose things like physical traits, backgrounds, hobbies, stuff like that? And how much of a difference will they make?
Well, certainly the cosmetic stuff, we want to give you guys as much variety as we can. It's still really too early to be specific on how much you can get on that wise. That's something that'll come later on in the development. But you can expect your standard change: eye color, hair color, facial features, potentially a little bit of body shape, but that's not 100% yet. So that one's a maybe. And those are just the superficial ones, but we do plan on having backgrounds for characters, so you can sort of give yourself a little backstory, and that actually is sort of the initial step for the VGM to start tailoring your gameplay through. So based on those choices, it already knows like who you might be allied with, what you're kind of more into as far as like your adventuring style. And what we've discussed, and not 100% yet, but we do want to have you pick your initial quest. So
Oh,
We
that's
have the
cool.
Yeah, we have the starter island of Ijar, and so one of those questions would be, what are you doing here? Like, why are you here on this island? Why did you come here? So by picking that, that's already that first step of like, okay, now I know how to start catering things to this player.
All right. Well, I gotta say that sounds really awesome. I don't. I'm pretty sure I've never played a game that allowed me to choose my starting quest. So that definitely sounds unique. Tell them that Chris here at Lorespire encourages that, and anybody else who thinks that sounds like an awesome choice and wants to vote for that, let us know down in the comments because yeah, I feel like that's a pretty cool idea. The one other thing that I did want to ask about that: will any of those choices like give you different mechanics? Like could your background or your traits maybe make you better at something or worse at something else? Or like has anything like that been discussed?
Well, it would sort of, well, it does sort of coincide with like your skills, and maybe give you some boosts here and there. But of course, you're also picking what your major and minor skills are, and that'll be the real determinant of those. But yeah, depending on your choices, you might get a little boost here and there. Nothing major, but a
Okay.
little extra.
Yeah, let's move on to character progression. I know it's supposed to be handled through like a level by doing system, that a lot of games, most notably the Elder Scrolls games, kind of use. Can you talk about how that's planned to work in the Wayward Realms, how it might be different or unique from the way that it's done in the other games, and just, progression in general, not just with the skills, but the overall character?
The biggest difference I think we're doing from most other games is we're not doing a character level. So it's all down to the skills. Basically, we want to put the emphasis on skills. Like that's what's important. That's what defines your character. So no character level. It's all going to be based on skills. We do have the attributes that grow based on the skills, but again, what you're doing is most important. So if you're not really using say speed a lot for whatever reason, you don't need a fast character, then you don't really have to worry about leveling up skills that improve that speed attribute. So with the focus on the skills, as they progress, you'll also be able to unlock like different abilities for them. So it, I can't really comment too much on what we have planned yet, but yeah, the importance is on the skills. As you level them up, you'll get better at them, you get new abilities for them, and the world reacts to those skills and what the level of those are. But that also is included in dialogue itself. It's not just about combat, it's also about knowing things in dialogue. I guess an example for a quest that I have written up, it's talking with some orc refugees that are just trying to get off of the starter island, and depending on what your skill is with swords, you might notice that these carrying a unique sword, right? It's a Wedkaran sword, which is the orcish alloy that orcs have. It's a bit stronger than steel. The way we're approaching it is you can have a hard fail, a soft fail, a soft pass, or a hard pass on your skill checks. So if you have a high sword skill, you'll know what that sword is, you'll comment on it, it might be offered to you as a little extra reward for helping them out. If you didn't know, then you might just notice, oh, he's got a strange sword, right? And that'll be the end of it. So there's sort of different ways to approach that dialogue. The other thing we're doing is we're also adding some XP even for those failed skill checks. So you didn't know that was what that sword was, but you knew it was a unique sword. You kind of leveled up a little bit. You kind of know a little bit like, oh yeah, they carry around some strange swords. I know that. So you get a little bit of XP towards your skill. So the idea being, you do get some for failing. You're going to get more for passing those skill checks, but it's a little bonus to the skills, and not to make it so you're trying to just power level everything by.
No, that's awesome, and I definitely love it whenever a game, works what your character, like your character skills or maybe even lack of skill with something into dialogue. just because it's a combat skill doesn't mean that it couldn't possibly affect, dialogue or your interaction with the world in a non-combat way. Just to be clear though, like, is that planned to be an option in the dialogue and you have to choose it, or is that going to be like a background check and then it just gets mentioned in the dialogue based on whatever, like if you passed it or hard passed it or failed it or
Mhm.
hard failed it?
It'll be mentioned in the dialogue, like that skill check will happen automatically, and you kind of get mentioned if you do have, like, say, a hard pass on it. If you do, like, your skill level's high enough, then you might get a keyword for it to bring it up in dialogue. So you
Oh,
might notice that
nice.
strange sword. If you do know what that strange sword is, and you get the option to point it out, hey, I see you're wearing that.
That, yeah, that's cool. That's kind of the best of both worlds because I like both systems and that kind of incorporates both. So I like that.
Can you tell us anything about the particular skills that will be in the game? Anything specific?
Yeah, I mean, there's not really too much detail I can go into. You can expect some of, like, the standard stuff. Say, like, the ability to charm people is a skill that you can level up. We're bringing back climbing from Daggerfall. That's a very popular thing to have. So, the ability to climb up walls and stuff, depending on that skill, you might be able to have an easier time climbing off, like, say, like, really sleek walls, or uh, going back to, like, particular race specific bonuses. If you're a Cambion and you have the clawed, bird feet, you can actually climb angles that is impossible for the other races to climb. So
Oh, really? That's pretty cool. Nice, nice. All right. Well, thanks for sharing that with us, especially the tidbit about the Cambia. It sounds like y'all really are getting some nice differences between the races there that could really be meaningful. I love it.
mhm.
I love it. And just one more thing about all that, the abilities that you mentioned, like we are talking about like active abilities that you could use, or are we just talking about passive bonuses, or maybe like a mixture of the two?
Well, passive bonuses will likely be just a race specific thing, but as far as the skills are concerned, we do want those to be actual, like, abilities that you unlock. We don't want just the generic, plus 10 to swords, or plus 10 to undead or something like that. We really want it to be more meaningful gameplay wise, so it'll be something an ability that you unlock.
Well, let's talk about magic. Magic is kind of my favorite thing in most fantasy game worlds. I almost always play a mage or some variation of a caster
Mhm.
on my with my first character in a fantasy game. How's magic planned to work? Just like the mechanics of it in game. Will there be magic points? Will magic regenerate naturally? Do you have to like learn, memorize spells, stuff like that?
Well, as someone who plays warrior all the time, I have to decline this question just out of principle. No. um,
No.
yeah, so magic, I don't want to get into the specifics of it lore wise, and how it works. It's kind of going to be up to the players to sort of speculate and brainstorm about and see what conclusions they reach. But
All
the
right.
idea is magic sort of exists around you in the world, right? It's almost like say, like, radiation, like how we get from the sun, right? We get that radiation and there's heat and we feel it. Magic is sort of similar like that. And when lore wise, like, when you know how to tap into it, then you're able to sort of bend it to your will and cast it that way. As far as, like, gameplay wise, we are bringing back spell creation. So
Oh,
you get
nice.
it's a
Nice.
very popular one.
Yes.
A mage is very unique in our game because magic is rare and looked down upon. Uh, I will say it's something that people believe is attributed to the goddesses. Again, if it's up to you whether you say you think that is the case or it's something different. But people believe it's attributed to the goddesses, so it's something that people shouldn't be messing with, right? You're immortal. This is divine energy. It's you shouldn't be messing with that. That's bad. That's blasphemous. So it's a bit rare to find mages in the game, and to be a mage, like, we really want to make that experience shine through. So a big part of the mage playthrough will be going out, adventuring into the world, and finding those new magical keywords, or fragments that you can craft new spells from. Maybe finding that mage hiding up in a mountaintop somewhere who can teach you some new spell. That kind of thing. We really want to make it feel like you're stumbling upon like these old forgotten things, and you're growing your power through that. Likewise, we want the people in town to react like if you just fire a fireball in the middle of town. Well, that the crowd's going to get scared. They're going to run away. You know, some guards might come after you for causing trouble. So that's really the core of the mage gameplay loop. Trying to get more powerful, but avoiding trouble, if you will.
I wasn't expecting that answer. I have so many more questions now I want to ask about that. So there's not going to be like a Mages Guild or Mages Guild type faction, like that. And
Right. There are some areas of the world that are more accepting of magic, right? And you might want to go to them for, you know, the different factions that you ally yourself with. But even then, like, magic is not something that's just paraded through town or anything like that. It's definitely a lot more rare, and you want to be careful with what you're doing with it.
and so it sounds like you definitely won't just like go find you know, a wizard who is selling spells in town or, you know, wherever, and just buy whatever spells you want from them, and then you have the spells. Like, sounds like you're actually going to have to like go out like questing and searching, and magic does feel a little too mundane in a lot of games because it's just so easy to come by. And that I don't know, I really like that sounds freaking awesome. I would like to know a little bit more about the lore, but I kind of like the angle, like figure it out for yourself. It sounds like magic coming from the goddesses is maybe just the general masses like view of it, not necessarily the truth. And I'm guessing that you're going to kind of have multiple viewpoints or evidence for maybe multiple you know, sources of the magic, and then you just got to kind of decide which one you want to believe in. Is that kind of what you're going with?
For sure. And then each like temple of the goddess probably has their own view on how magic you know, exists in the world. And, you know, ours is definitely the best one, right? He's got the best magics kind of thing.
Can you tell us if magic is going to be like broken down into schools or disciplines, you know, like destruction and thaumaturgy and stuff like that?
Right. Well, kind of like I was saying with the temples, like there's magics that are attributed to specific goddesses. So you can sort of break it down into like schools that way. It's not so specific because, again, magic isn't so widespread that categorized so well, right? But
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
And then
Awesome.
there's some other stuff that is not attributed to the goddesses that I don't really want to get into too much detail on, but there is some non-divine forms of magic, if you will.
All right, sounds like my kind of magic right there. I know that y'all have the Kickstarter starting later this month. Before we go, like, is there anything you want to say about the Kickstarter? Is there just anything I didn't ask you about the game that you maybe want to discuss, or just anything?
Well, as far as Kickstarter, yeah, we haven't announced the date yet, so make sure you guys keep a close eye. We'll have some more info on that coming soon, and along with a new trailer that'll go into more gameplay, right? Because we really do want to show off what the game is and really show you like a nice little gameplay slice of what you can expect. It's, again, still early, so you know, don't expect a full blown, all the systems up and running kind of thing, but just kind of show you like what we have done, the kind of progress we've made, and what you kind of can expect. I guess, well, if anything along those lines, if you're gonna ask me something, I guess it would be that, like, what players should be expecting from the game. I guess I personally just get a little worried from some folks because we're not a AAA studio. This is our first game together as a studio, so you know, we're not working miracles here, right? Like, we are still we're going for a AA budget, and we're really focusing on that adventure core gameplay loop. I know stuff like armor and weapon crafting is a big request, but something that we feel is like out of the purview of the gameplay loop and would be sort of a waste of resources for what we're trying to achieve. It's not a life sim. I know some people like to request stuff like farming and things like that. We'd love to do it, but we have to kind of be realistic with what we can achieve with the resources that we have and what we're aiming for. So just kind of a reminder to folks on that.
All right. That's good info to have. So what Victor's really saying there is y'all need to head to the Kickstarter, give them some support, buy the game whenever it comes out. And then whenever it does really well, maybe we'll get some of that stuff in a sequel, maybe,
Yeah,
maybe.
absolutely. Definitely something we want to just keep building up over time.
All right. That's great. Thank you so much for your time, Victor. Really, really appreciate it. We'll be keeping a lookout for the Kickstarter so that we can give y'all some support there. And look forward to maybe talking to you again in the future.
Sure, absolutely. And I do want to say, still be excited for the game. I'm definitely excited for the game. I think it's going to be some great stuff.
I'm excited for it. It sounds like it's going to be some great stuff. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.